In the dark, grim heart of the 14th century, the world was a place of relentless struggle and unending conflict. Imagine a time when kings and queens fought for power, knights charged into battle, and ordinary people were caught in the middle, their lives torn apart by war. This is the story of two extraordinary women who refused to be mere bystanders in the chaos of their times. Their courage and determination would change the course of history, proving that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can shine through with incredible strength and resilience. In the year 1341, Charles of Blois captured Jean de Montfort, a powerful nobleman, and sent him to Paris to be held prisoner by King Philip VI of France. This act could have marked the end of Jean de Montfort's cause, but it was only the beginning of a new and even more daring chapter. Jean's wife, a woman of remarkable courage and intelligence, took up the cause with a fire that would inspire generations to come. This woman, whose name has been lost to history, rode from town to town, rallying the dispirited supporters of her husband. She was not just a figurehead, she was a leader in every sense of the word. She told the people, "Ha, seigneurs, never mourn for my lord whom you have lost. He is but one man," and promised that she had enough riches to maintain the fight. She did more than just speak, she acted. She provisioned and fortified garrisons, organized resistance, and paid largely and gave freely. She presided over councils, conducted diplomacy, and even wrote eloquent and graceful letters. When Charles de Blois besieged the city of Hennebont, this woman did not hide behind the walls. Instead, she donned full armor, mounted a war horse, and led the defense against the enemy. She exhorted her soldiers under a hail of arrows, and ordered the women to cut their skirts short and carry stones and pots of boiling pitch to the walls to cast down upon the attackers. During a lull in the battle, she led a group of knights out through a secret gate, galloped around to the enemy's rear, and launched a surprise attack that destroyed half of their force and ended the siege. Her bravery and strategic brilliance did not end there. She continued to devise feints and stratagems, wield her sword in sea battles, and never wavered in her commitment to the cause. Even when her husband escaped from the Louvre in disguise and died shortly after reaching Brittany, she remained steadfast. She continued to fight for her son, who was just a toddler at the time, ensuring that his claim to the throne would not be forgotten. Meanwhile, in 1346, Charles de Blois was captured by the English and taken to prison in England. His wife, Jean de Penthièvre, was no less determined to continue the fight. Despite being crippled, she pursued her husband's cause with unwavering resolve. The war between the two factions continued, and it was a brutal, relentless conflict. The Countess of Montfort, however, eventually succumbed to the stresses of her life. She went mad and was confined in England, where she would live for another 30 years, forgotten and alone. While these dramatic events were unfolding in Brittany, a different kind of struggle was taking place in Flanders. Flanders, a wealthy and strategically important region, was a crucial stake in the ongoing rivalry between England and France. The towns of Flanders were the leading commercial centers of the 14th century, known for their weaving industry and the wealth it generated. The magnates of the bourgeoisie lived in luxury that astonished even the Queen of France when she visited Bruges. She remarked, "I thought I would be the only queen here, but I find 600 others." Flanders was a fief of France, but its economy was deeply tied to England. The wool from England was essential for the Flemish weaving industry, just as Gascony's wine was crucial for England. This economic interdependence created a complex web of alliances and conflicts. The Count of Flanders, Louis de Nevers, and the Flemish nobility were pro-French, while the merchants and workers who depended on the cloth industry were pro-English. This divide was the source of much of the turbulence and uprisings in the region. In 1302, the common people of Flanders inflicted a devastating defeat on the French knights at the Battle of Courtrai. The French knights, in their splendid armor, charged the Flemish workers, only to be defeated in a bloody massacre. 700 gold spurs were taken from the fallen knights and hung in the church as a symbol of the victory. This battle was a turning point, showing that the common soldier, armed with a pike and a strong motive, could defeat even the most elite knights. The French, however, did not forget this humiliation. In 1328, at the Battle of Cassel, they exacted a terrible revenge, slaughtering thousands of Flemish workers and peasants. Despite this, the memory of Courtrai remained a powerful symbol of the potential of the common people. In 1339, the industrial towns of Flanders, led by Ghent, rose in revolt against the Count of Flanders, who was supported by France. Jacob van Artevelde, a dynamic and ambitious merchant, emerged as the leader of the insurrection. Artevelde forced the Count to flee to France and took control of the region. He then formed an alliance with King Edward III of England, who, as the supplier of wool to the Flemish industry, was eager to gain a foothold in Flanders. Edward assumed the title of King of France, a move that was more symbolic than practical, but it allowed him to form a treaty with Artevelde. The alliance was initially successful, but Artevelde's ambition eventually led to his downfall. He proposed that Edward's son, the future Black Prince, should supplant the Count of Flanders' son as the heir to the region. This was too much for the Flemish towns, who were loyal to their natural lord. Resentment and suspicion grew, and in 1345, a mob stormed Artevelde's house and killed him. The death of Artevelde was a turning point. Representatives of the Flemish towns rushed to England to appease King Edward, and suggested a marriage between Edward's daughter Isabella and the Count of Flanders' son Louis. This was a clever move, as it would allow Edward's line to inherit Flanders without dispossessing the rightful lord. However, the plan ultimately failed, and the Count's son escaped, leaving behind an unwed princess and setting the stage for future conflicts. The power of King Edward III seemed puny compared to that of King Philip VI of France. Edward's initial campaign had been costly, and he had relied heavily on loans from the great Florentine banking firms of the Bardi and Peruzzi. When Edward could not repay the loans, the Italian companies went bankrupt, causing economic turmoil in Florence and beyond. The situation was further exacerbated by a series of disasters, including famine and the Black Death, which devastated Europe. To raise an army for a second assault, Edward needed the support of the three estates represented in Parliament. The key issue was money. War had become a costly affair, and the medieval state had not yet developed a regular method to pay for it. Edward resorted to loans, arbitrary taxation, and devaluation of the coinage. The taking of prisoners for ransom became a commercial enterprise, and loot on the campaign was essential to keep the troops motivated and paid. In 1344, Parliament was asked to show their opinion on the breach of the truce by France. The advice was to end the war, either by battle or honorable peace, and to see it through to the end. The clergy and commons voted subsidies, and in 1345, Parliament authorized the king to require landowners to serve in person or provide a substitute or a monetary equivalent. Towns and shires were required to raise a given number of archers, and the system was administered by sheriffs and county officials. The logistics of raising an army were complex. Ships had to be requisitioned to carry men, horses, and supplies. Millstones and bake ovens, armorers and their forges, and extra materials for arrows were all part of the preparations. The ships were small, averaging 30 to 50 tons, but some were as large as 200 tons. A medium-sized ship carried 100 to 200 men and 80 to 100 horses. To fill the ranks, men were recruited by promising loot, pardoning outlaws, and stirring up anti-French sentiment. King Edward's assumption of the title of King of France was proclaimed to the people, and the fear of French invasion was used to rally support. Warning beacons were planted along the coast, armed men and horses were stationed at intervals, and small ships were drawn close to the land. The 14th century was a time of great upheaval, and the stories of these women and the struggles of Flanders and Brittany are just a small part of the larger tapestry of medieval history. These individuals, despite the challenges they faced, showed incredible courage and determination. Their actions remind us that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can rise to meet the challenges and create a better future.